right. Next patient is an engineer. He had severe neuropathy. He had sores at the tips of his toes, infections, and preulcerative lesions underneath his second and third metatarsals. I had to shorten the metatarsals, straighten the toes. He did fine with that. Came back 5.5 years later. Big toe is curling, preulcerative lesion. Had to fuse that, but I noticed swelling over where we had the hardware. We moved the hardware, and he ended up coming back a couple weeks later for his second post-op visit. He says, "Okay, doc, being the anal engineer that I am, I looked at what happened with my body here." He said, 6 years ago, I had an ACL repair with titanium screw. 4 years ago, prior to the surgery, he started developing neuropathy symptoms. His feet progressed to his hands, his entire body. He put the hardware in my feet. 3 months later, I started developing basically paralysis for 45 minutes every 2 to 3 days, and went up to 10 hours a day. He was disabled. He took the screws out of my feet, and I went from being paralyzed 10 hours a day to 1 hour a day. Then he ended up, we got him tested with the ELISA test, and he was positive for nickel and significantly positive for palladium, which he had in 6 white gold crowns in his mouth, 26% palladium. So here were the screws from his feet and the one from his knee. And so I ended up presenting his case over in London at a lecture on metal allergies or metal sensitivities and reactions associated with systemic effects. And this was a open letter to Dr. Vera Stetsko, who developed the ELISA test. So even though we never met, Dr. Stetsko's impact on my life is immeasurable. Our lives crossed paths after I had been a rigid quadriplegic for over 5.5 years. I experienced episodes of paralysis that would leave me completely immobilized, paralyzed for excess of 10 hours a day. Neurologists and geneticists performed neurological and genetic testing at the University of Washington and Mayo Clinic over this time without additional diagnosis other than episodic rigid quadriplegia. It wasn't until my podiatrist, Dr. Scott Schroeder, suggested the ELISA test that I saw any hope. When Dr. Stetsko offered to do the ELISA test herself on a gratis basis was more than I could have ever hoped for. The testing and results allowed me and my doctors to understand what was truly happening in my body. Then we were able to formulate a treatment plan. Today, as I write this, I am completely paralysis-free, and words cannot express my gratitude for what a difference Dr. Stetsko has made in my life. I was told that most likely I'd be in a wheelchair the rest of my life, and just last year I had the opportunity to walk my daughter down the aisle at her wedding. So he had oxidation under these implants. I think he had a galvanic reaction between the two that then exacerbated the sensitivity reaction of the two. So in closing, these diagnostic reactions or diagnoses mental reactions, you have to have a high index of clinical suspicion. And really, we need to train our medical community. A lot of the surgeons and docs in our area have no idea about this, and I would implore the FDA to really work with this in medical school training residencies and CME courses. As far as testing goes, one of my rheumatologist colleagues says, I don't have great tests all the time, but I have to use those in combination with my clinical information. And so the ELISA test has been significantly important for me, and I really think this needs to be covered by insurance throughout this country to really get this thing going. And we need more implants and better implants for good functioning non-metallic implants as possible. And last slide, and obviously there's more research needed, and but we really have people that are out there suffering now, and so we really need to get this information out to the docs. Thank you very much.